Hi, I'm Brett Ullman. Welcome to Navigating Everything. This is the channel where I try and help equip you to deal with, I just say, navigate big topics like mental health, parenting, men, and many others. Today's actually one of those many others. What I want to do is to walk through a question I get quite a lot, emailed to me or people after one of my talks, and it's usually a parent who walks up and says this: Brett, I either caught my kid looking at porn or I found out that they're looking at porn. What do I do? Porn is one of those 7 topics that I speak on, and I'll actually tag above my talk called The Porn Project. But for today, I wanted to do something a little different. And so I'm going to bring a friend of mine on. His name's Paul Lavergne, and he is a registered psychotherapist at the Turning Point Counseling Center, which is in Peterborough, Ontario. Paul and I met a number of years ago at I say a porn conference. That sounds really weird to say, but maybe to say a conference about pornography. Anyways, Paul, I want to just click and welcome you here. And just tell everyone a bit about you, who you are, and what you do.
Hey, Brett. It's great to do this talk with you. Thanks so much for having me on this call and on your YouTube channel. So, yeah, like you mentioned, I'm a registered psychotherapist. So I'm a member of the College of Psychotherapists, have a master's degree in counseling psychology. And I've also been trained as a sexual recovery therapist by the American Association of Sex Addiction Therapists in Colorado, US. So I'm in private practice in Peterborough. I'd say about half of my caseload, 50 to 60% of my caseload is specifically dealing with people that have compulsive sexual behaviors. So for the viewers that are listening, the more common term is sex addiction. I don't like using that term. I find it somewhat inaccurate and misleading. So I use the term compulsive sexual behaviors, and this refers to an umbrella term that refers to most commonly compulsive pornography use with masturbation, other behaviors like sexting, texting, hooking up, dating sites, chat rooms, webcams, anonymous sexual encounters, going to see escorts, strip clubs, rub and tugs, and phone sex, although there's not a lot of that going on, but some of that. So those are kind of the things that I deal with typically day to day. I like to call that another day at the office. So that's what I talk about. And in the other half of my practice is the normal things you would think about therapists doing, talking about depression, anxiety, stress, family relationships, career stress and things like that. And as well, I also travel and speak. Like you mentioned, we met at a conference in Ottawa, and your reputation had preceded you, Brad. I had heard about you from a client who really loved your work. And you're also, people say, when they meet someone, I thought you'd be taller. I was like, I thought you'd be shorter, because I'm 6'2", and you were, you must be 6'4" or something. You were.
I'm 6'6", yeah.
6'6", yes. Okay, so you were towering over me. I'm like, oh, hi, Brett. Yeah, tall guy. So that kind of thing. You and I both spoke at that conference. I've been to high schools, just a few in the Hamilton area. Nothing, close to what you've done, as I know you've made a full-time career out of speaking for many years now. But one of my, particular passions I have is training other mental health professionals to deal with compulsive sexual behaviors, because there's no training on this. There's not a single graduate school I'm aware of that has even a single course, or never mind a course, a single module or section about treating compulsive sexual behaviors. So for a few years, I've been putting together intensives and trainings, doing keynote speaking and things like that. And I'm trying to strategize about how to probably move all that online for 2021, because with COVID, that's kind of what we're being forced to do. So that's me in a nutshell.
What I like about, I speak predominantly in the Christian church world, and I know you kind of do a bit of everything. But what's interesting, in the church world, we kind of sometimes we address pornography, but what you do is kind of you're right, this larger umbrella, which we only seem to address when there's an issue, when someone's had the affair, when someone's had something, then we deal with it. But we're not really great at the prevention, which we'll get into later. I think we should just set a playing field. Let's define pornography. What would you say a good definition would be of this?
So I define pornography as any material, visual, written, or auditory, that exist for the purpose of creating sexual arousal.
Hmm.
That's basically it. So if you use that as a working definition, I love the swimsuit edition of Sports Illustrated in that, because the portrayals of women in that magazine, I'm not going to find a guy that's going to even argue with me about this, that it creates sexual arousal, but it's not a porn magazine. And you'll see images everywhere, literally, that are not created for a pornographic website or in that presented in that format, but absolutely create sexual arousal. And so if you think about it, if you use that as a working definition, the fitness industry, the beauty industry, and the fashion industry have all become pornified. So
Yeah,
our
I would
whole
agree.
culture has literally become pornified. Oh, in the music industry, a lot of music videos I don't differentiate quantitatively from porn. There's really no difference.
I like that, because your definition is again, I think broader definitions are better for these conversations, because everyone listening is a little different. I mean, I'm assuming a lot of people listening are parents, maybe youth workers, maybe a leader in some environment, faith-based or not, but this is one of those things that if you just talk about one thing, it's very narrow, but we're kind of talking about a whole bunch here. What would you say? So I'm 49. I'm almost 50. I don't want to talk about that.
My condolences.
But thinking back in the day, right? Looking back at when we were all growing up, what is the difference in pornography from then to now? And I guess the question is then, why is it problematic, the difference between pornography then and now?
Well, it's a great question, because I still run into people that think we're talking about Playboy. And then there's this myth floating around out there where, and so these are people in their 40s and up, 40s and 50s typically, and they're like, well, I looked at Playboy, I'm fine. Or my dad or grandpa had Playboy, or my own grandfather, remember, had the pin-up topless calendars, on the back of the door. Like, well, not openly flaunted, but it's there, So it's like, yeah, what's the big deal? My grandfather wasn't a sexual predator, and I looked at Playboy and I'm fine. And I'm like, Playboy isn't even, as of the end of this year, they're not even actually publishing anymore. Like, they're done. Like, they just announced that a few weeks ago, because no one buys magazines anymore, right? And they went from Playboy used to have a monthly circulation of 5.5 million back in the 70s, which is a significant circulation for a magazine. And by 2018, they were down to 206,000, and now they're basically gone. So porn
because that's signing up, like that's someone signing up for a subscription to a magazine. Like, that's what's staggering about that number.
That's right. Now they're not gone away, because they've basically adopted the online model. And they will be generating revenue from licensing alone for decades to come. Okay.
Wow.
So the model has gone from online pay-per-view and licensing, right? But there's several distinctions I want to make between porn of the Playboy era. So I count that up to the 80s. And even, let's throw in the 80s as well, because 80s is the era of the VHS, right? And then the 90s is the DVD. So even including everything up into the 90s, there's a significant difference between that and online porn. So let's go with the 4 A's, and I'm sure you've heard about this, familiar with this, Brett, probably even talk about it in your talk. Some people have the 3 A's, I use 4. Number 1 is it's anonymous. So there was a sort of a built-in restriction to, actually getting porn back in the 70s or 80s, or think yourself as a kid or teenager. Like, first of all, it's very hard to find. Like, you can only go to a store, like a convenience store. And secondly, they're not supposed to sell to you if you're under 18. And thirdly, you're embarrassed to even go there. And like, what if you're standing there buying it and grandma walks in and you just die on the spot because you're so embarrassed, right? So there was a lot of sort of built-in, like, kind of structural and cultural limitations. Even though we say 5.6 million magazines, there was like a lot of, like, most people still didn't go to the store to buy Playboy, right? But that's why the subscriptions were very popular, because it came in a nice anonymous brown wrapped paper cover and just delivered right to your door. So porn now is anonymous, so you can go online. You don't need to create a profile. If you do, you can create a fake one, and no one knows who you are or what you're doing. So this creates a sort of a protective blanket that buffers against self-awareness and your shame around using pornography. The second would be affordable. So, you know, I suppose back in the day, you might only pay $8 or $9 or $10 or $12 for a porn magazine. And even if you bought 2 or 3 a month, you know, maybe it was only $30 or $40, but it was still some kind of financial investment was required. And now it's basically all virtually free. The third thing is it's accessible. So when I say accessible, I mean ubiquitous. I mean that basically almost every man, woman, and child in every household in North America, and every person listening to me, has a portal directly into the world of hardcore pornography. And it looks like this. Where is it? Oh, here. Here's the portal. Okay. It's the black rectangle. So everyone has a black rectangle that is a portal to that world. And the fourth thing is it's aggressive. And what I mean by aggressive is I mean that they're coming for you. Okay. So what people don't understand is like, you know, people like I'm talking about the general public tend to think of porn as some kind of vague, ephemeral, is that the right word? Ephemeral?
Ethereal? Like the...
Yeah, kind of this wispy, foggy, vague sort of malevolent entity floating around out there. And it's like, no, these are multinational billion-dollar corporations with a board of directors, a sales team, a marketing team, very, very talented IT experts. They recruit the best and brightest minds in the technology industry. And actually the cutting edge technology of the internet was driven in a large part by the pornography industry. So they have groups of sales teams and marketing teams that sit around discussing strategies to promote market share and maximize revenue. And I listened to a podcast about a guy that used to work for MindGeek. So for those that don't know, the largest porn site in the world is called Pornhub, and it's owned by a company called MindGeek, and it's located in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. So this IT guy was talking about how they will run a split test on, say, 4 different facial expressions of a woman in a sex scene, and run a split test on how many clicks they get. And they know with an unbelievable amount of detailed accuracy which exact facial expressions, sounds, positions, angles, everything will get the most clicks. So we'll talk later about how this is engineered to hijack the reward system in your brain. They have perfected the science of hijacking your brain. Yeah, so that's the difference.
It's funny. I never used the aggressive part. Like I've used the 3 before, but the aggressive one, you're right. It's a big change. So going back to the original question, a parent says, you know, I've caught my kid looking at porn. I guess, so here's the first part. What is the dangers of porn? Like, why should they be concerned?
Yeah, and just to finish up too, and the difference, and I guess it slipped my mind because it's so obvious to me, but it's hardcore. Okay, so porn, like there's literally was no sex in Playboy. Like there was no people having sex in Playboy ever. It's a woman standing and getting nude pictures done. So porn is not that. It's every sex act you can imagine with every amount of people and every scenario that really you can think of. Okay, so I just thought I'd throw that in there too. Okay, so it's not these, I mean, Playboy is really quite quaint now if you look at it, if I can use that word, not to downplay that, because it was still about the total objectification of women, but it really seems quite quaint. You know, these sort of soft lighting airbrushed depictions of ideal female beauty, right? That's not what we're talking about now. But you said, what are the dangers? So, you know, really, I mean, I could talk all day about this, and sometimes I do, but let's talk about number 1 is unrealistic portrayals of sex. So okay, an unrealistic portrayal of sex. So what? Well, the people watching this, and think young men and women. Okay, and I need to stress that women are the largest growing demographic of porn users are females 18 to 25. So I think people need to be aware of that, right? So your arousal template is virtually unformed. Your sexuality is sort of nascent and latent and maybe developing as a preteen or a teen. And you're fresh meat for the porn industry, so to speak, and you're naive about sex, as you should be when you're a child or a preteen or teen. But now you're going to get information from someone. You're going to require input, data, images, a story, and you're going to get that in, like, there's several places that you could get that. But if you get it from the world of pornography, then it's going to shape your attitudes, conceptualizations, and expectations that will be potentially problematic later in life, or almost certainly problematic later in life. So, and this is going to impact your relationships later in life. Okay, so like I'll just give you a brief example. Okay, so girls are portrayed in pornography as existing to serve the sexual needs of men, and their sexual pleasure is irrelevant, hidden, or just not. It's just not important. And certain sex acts are to be expected and as normal. Okay, so what happens is that in high school, and you know this, and I've spoken to people. You know, you were one of the people I interviewed a couple of months ago, Brad, for a project I did, and I interviewed 10 experts from around the world, and they're all telling me the same thing. These are people in the U.S., Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and Sweden. Okay, and in high school, guys are taking girls on dates, and it's just straight to oral and choking. Okay, so you're thinking, oh, so if you're a parent and your 16-year-old is going on a date, there's a good possibility that the boy that she's dating, in his mind, is expecting that by the first or second date, they'll be engaging in sexual activity that will include oral sex and him choking her. Okay, so you know, and I say this to most parents, and they look at me completely stunned and shocked, because this isn't how you and I grew up. And I'm like, well, that's because what they learned from porn. So, which leads me to number two, which is a distorted view of women. And, you know, it's really, you can sum it up as they're portrayed as objects to be used and not human beings to be loved and respected. People that, you know, and there's always a challenge, Brett, in dealing with this issue. It's like, how much do you tell? How much do you say? How graphic do you get? Like I've not used pornography in 15 years, but and I say I haven't used it, okay? But it doesn't mean I haven't seen things. I haven't seen screenshots or pages on websites or clips of videos, because researching this, and this is a challenge, like researching this without like defiling yourself is the only word I can think for it, is tricky, right? And so some of what I say is based on other people's firsthand experience with this. But porn is very mainstream, not all of it, but mainstream, just your average video on Pornhub, is very degrading and violent and abusive. So what I mean is that the behavior that you see portrayed from men to woman, for example, will include a lot of name calling, really vile names I never even heard that knew existed before I was studying the porn industry. And it's kind of like it's morphed away from sex into straight up abuse. Like it's actually, porn is like a form of eroticized violence now, where there's punching and kicking and spitting and choking and urinating on people and just really abusing them terribly, verbally and physically.
Yeah.
So that is what I mean by a distorted view of women. So, because remember, if you're a kid or teen, your arousal template is unformed. And what I mean by that is the part of your brain that learns what's sexy or learns what's arousing is, you know, it's just a lump of Play-Doh, right? So whatever you impose on that in those formative years is going to shape your tastes sexually and shape your what turns you on. Okay. The other thing I think that we need to understand about watching online porn is it separates sexual arousal and excitement from relational connection. So for people that watch pornography, and when I say watch pornography, Brett, what I mean is, like, obviously there's a continuum of that, but it's not uncommon for me to talk to clients, young men that watch porn daily, 2 or 3 times a day. And by the time they're in their early 20s, they're into thousands of hours of porn watching. So I remember one 24-year-old young man I talked to had logged about 8,000 hours of pornography. Okay. So 8,000 hours of disconnected sex with himself, in a sense, you could say, with his hand, literally. Okay. And then what happens is so he grows up in his developmental and formative years, never connecting sexual arousal with reciprocity with another human being. It's isolated and disconnected, and their brain is glued to the fantasy world of object sex. Okay, so object sex is the only thing that arouses, right? Because what they see women in porn they're basically objects. The fourth problem that I think porn creates is reduces empathy in the viewer. So because of reasons I mentioned before about how violent, degrading, and abusive it is to watch that while stimulating yourself and being sexually aroused and having orgasm, while a woman is being called vile names and beaten and urinated upon, is there's a part of you that if you were capable of feeling empathy, that simply gets in the way of you obtaining the reward. So that has to be ignored or dismissed or numbed out. And I don't know, it's hard to quantify empathy, or like, I have less or more. It's not like it works on a scale of 1 to 10 or something, but I know anecdotally from talking to people that is something that happens. And there actually is research done on that. For example, they've done research where they've showed porn to people and then interviewed them later, and they're more likely to accept rape myths, like myths like, well, woman wanted, or she asked for it, or things like that, that show a reduction in empathy. Because empathy can be inferred by like how someone talks or thinks, right? So you can maybe not completely accurately measure empathy, but we can get a pretty good handle on it, I think. So.
And I think empathy is one of those things we're losing today. Like when we talk to students, and I like many things. I mean, with violence, MMA is now normal. You and I didn't grow up watching people beaten into unconsciousness, but today no one thinks it's a big deal. But there is like, and I don't mind watching it, but there's sometimes I watch a bit and I'm like, I got to stop this. But then move that over to pornography and violence and other things. It's making us, I don't know if it's just we have this flaccid, maybe that's not the right term with this conversation, like it makes us, just, we don't have any, what's the term? Like, just, you know what I mean? Like we don't, when someone's hurt, it doesn't matter. We see a woman getting hurt in porn, it doesn't matter because it's all about us. And that goes back to your point about men. And I know men and women look at porn, but I know in my new conversations for men, a lot of the stuff around sex is that it's not just about you, it's about two people. Yeah. But when you've grown up looking at porn, it's only about you. There is no other person.
Yeah. Well, and I'm thinking like, let's look at how kids grow up today. And and this isn't a criticism of like, say, gaming or anything, but so we grow up playing Call of Duty and killing people. Okay. And then we watch porn and we see women like basically being raped while we get off on it and verbally abused. And then we see, music videos where they're just objects. And then we see, what was the other example you just said? Or was it video games?
Video game, MMA, just violence.
Oh, and MMA, right. And MMA. And so, like as an adult, I have, like you and I have a little more nuanced view of that, about how, there's rules and structure and it's a sport and they choose to do it and there is a referee and no one wants to see anyone actually get hurt. And, the guys literally like hug each other after usually. And if the guy's really hurt, there's like genuine concern. So I would say MMA in a sense actually probably has potential to convey a little bit more of the sportsmanship and the empathy than the other things, but that's the nuanced view of it that you and I have. But to a kid, it's like, yeah, like what do they say? Kill him, right? but you know, they don't have much of a prefrontal cortex yet, so maybe that's what's going on. But yeah, I mean, I think as a generation, it's something that, if we have the next generation grow up on porn, it's going to kill the empathy of men. Yeah. So I think that was. I have one more thing too, which is really, you know, I think very significant about what's different about porn. The degree, because I said it's so hardcore and the novelty is endless. Okay, and this is something worth like noting. Okay, because you know, back in the day, let's say you subscribe to Playboy, and every month you get a magazine with 1 to 2 pictorials that include, 2 to 3 features of women. So you might have 3 women with 10 pictures each, let's say, so 30 pictures. So every month you have 30 pictures, okay? And so your tolerance to that basically stays the same. And it's probably not likely that you're at risk for putting yourself in danger of developing a porn addiction. But honestly, I don't have stats on this, but I think the majority of guys that just had the one Playboy a month, and you know, they look at it and they like throw it in the closet and like that was it, right? Mm-hmm. But now, like, you can look at 30 pictures in about a minute. And no, sorry, not 30 pictures, 30 videos of people engaging in sexual acts in a minute.
And 30 different women, different people.
30 different, exactly, right. So in an hour, like I have clients that go on 7-hour porn binges. Wow. So in 7 hours, I don't know if you could even study this. And this is the problem too with like studying some of these aspects of porn. Like you're into ethical violations, you know, when you want to study some of this. But I don't know. I'd imagine in a 7-hour binge that you were looking at hundreds of different people engaging in hundreds of different sex acts. So you could literally see more in that one binge than the other guy in an entire year of subscribing to Playboy. So the point is, modern porn hijacks the reward system of your brain and changes the neural pathways. And this creates what we call a high degree of salience for the reward, okay? So salience means that, there's a hierarchy of things in our mind that possess greater value based on the level of reward that they can give us, okay? So let's take food, for example. Like, what's your favorite food?
Chicken shawarma.
Okay, and do you have a favorite, like, sweet treat, like a dessert?
Vanilla ice cream.
Vanilla ice cream, okay. And good job on the shawarma. I love that stuff too, okay? So what happens is, let's say you go to a buffet and there's like cookies, brownies, apple pie, vanilla ice cream. So the highest salience for your brain sits with the vanilla ice cream, and you will experience a desire or maybe even a craving to eat the vanilla ice cream. And in fact, as you walk in the restaurant to get seated, you catch it catches your eye, and you're actually a little preoccupied with that vanilla ice cream, anticipating the reward that vanilla ice cream is going to bring you. Okay. And this is like what I'm describing. If you expand that, is a food addiction in itself as well, because you have preoccupation, obsession, and compulsion, which is the hallmark of an unhealthy behavior of any kind. So anyway, the point back to porn is, this is what's called a supernormal stimulus. And this was a phrase, you talk about this in your porn talk? Supernormal stimulus? Yeah. Yep. So this guy, Nicholas Tinbergen, is a Nobel Prize winning scientist. And he coined this phrase, supernormal stimulus. So basically what he found was that he could create an artificial stimulus that would go beyond what the organism was evolved to want. So the two examples that come to mind are, he saw a bird laid on their eggs of a certain color, so he made bigger, brighter eggs of brighter colors, and the bird would ignore their own eggs and sit on those eggs. And then the other more well-known one was about the butterflies. So the male butterfly would seek out the brightly colored female butterfly to mate, and then he built cardboard butterflies a little bigger and a little brighter and more colorful, And this represented a supernormal stimulus to the male butterfly. So he would ignore the real butterflies, okay? See where this is going, unable to be aroused by real life, and gravitate to the fake representation of an exaggerated female butterfly. And this is what online porn does. Because it's not just a girl, it's hypersexualized, super large breasts, plastic surgery, blonde hair, everything you want. It's not one woman, it's 3 at once, it's 5 at once. It's not 2 people having sex, it's 10 people having sex. So this literally, there's a part of your brain called the reward system in the limbic brain that mediates pleasure. And that's mostly produced through the release of a neurochemical called dopamine and other chemicals, encephalins and serotonin and adrenaline. But what happens is when the young, well, it doesn't matter what your age, but especially the younger people whose brains are still very neuroplastic, they're exposed to this supernormal stimuli, and this moves to the top of the hierarchy in terms of salience, desirability. This is the vanilla ice cream. And it's funny you say vanilla because, you know, that's the term for boring porn. It's just vanilla porn, right?
Well, tiger tail then. If I did another one, I'd say tiger tail. Let's go.
Oh, love that stuff. Let's go with that. Let's go with that. So we go right to the tiger tail. Bright, colorful. It's the flavors are a little unexpected and exciting, you know, on the palate and all of that. So that's what they want. That's what they crave. That's what they destroy. So I want to be clear because I think, you know, you talk to 100 people on the street, just random people. 99 of them don't understand. But regular use of online pornography coupled with masturbation can lead to an addiction so crippling and devastating and life-consuming that it can literally destroy and ruin a person's life. To the degree that we associate with meth addiction, alcoholism, cocaine, gambling, or anything else.
And that's why, I mean, and that's why we have to address this as parents. Like, absolutely. I mean, when you look at the outcome, I think we see too much. I just read a book called Upstream. You ever read Upstream? It was Chipper Dan Heath. Anyways, it's the idea of we always are like putting the fires out. We don't look at why the fire started. So if we're looking at people who have addictions who are seeing you, how do we go back and have good sex education? Like, I know the Christian world debates those things, but like, how do we educate our kids so we don't have broken kids later on in life? Which is also a quote by, I think, Frederick Douglass.
Yeah, it's easier. There's something about it's easier to like basically not let them get damaged than it is to fix them later, right?
Yeah.
Something like that. Frederick, fix a broken man or something. I know the quote you mean.
So
okay,
if we,
that's a big one. Can you narrow that down a bit? Because that's a big one.
Yeah. So let's actually go back. I think parents need to know what is porn, the effects of porn, everything else. But if you are that parent and you've just either caught your kid or you found out through, you know, history, what do you do? Now, I think what's really important is first reactions, because I think sometimes we react in a way that then affects our relationship with our kids. So what would you say to the parent, I've just found my kids watching pornography?
Be calm. Be calm.
And that's easy to say, but hard to do. But I agree.
My face right now, this is my calm face. This is how you should look. And how you look right now, this is how you should look when you're talking to your kid. Not like this. You know, like, oh, you know, like this. This is what kids are probably seeing most of the time, right? Be calm. Okay. Parents are way out of the loop on this. Like, I'm sure you know this talking to them. Like so far out of the loop. It's almost criminal, you know. And I don't mean that as a criticism. Like, it's just an observation, right? And that's why I'm so thankful for like the work you do and other people of making them aware. Like, you know, because most parents, generally speaking, are doing their best, you know, trying their best with what they have. And it's a real challenge just keeping up on everything, right? So I don't expect that every parent's going to automatically know like all the things that you and I know. I mean, you and I work in this field, right? But here's the thing: your kid's going to see porn. I'm gonna say that again for the naive Christian parents. Your kid is going to see porn. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Okay. And well, I kind of, the way I looked at the conversation with my boys, I have two sons who are grown up now, but hey guys, I know you see porn. So, okay, so they need to know that Because kids think that like you don't have a clue, like that you really are unaware that these sites exist with billions of images of pornography, that it's their little secret in their friends, right? So it's like, hey, I know there's porn out there. I know there's porn hubs and RedTube and browsers and all these sites, and I know that you're going to come across it. And I want you to know that that this is something that we need to have some conversations about, because I know it's a bit awkward for both of us, but let's keep it real here. It's like drugs and alcohol, okay? It's out there and you're going to be exposed, and you need to have good boundaries. You need to have good rules, okay? So should you never drink? And, I'm not like if there's people watching this that are total abstainers, or, that's fine. Like, I'm not trying to step on those toes. But it's like, hey, you're going to drink, so let's talk about when that happens. This is the drinking age. I know you're not going to wait till the drinking age. So, if you're going to drink before then, this is like, never get in a car with someone who's been drinking, never drive drunk. Call me at 3 a.m. if you need a ride home, if you're at a party drinking, okay? Yeah. Now, if you come home and you're hammered and you fall down and throw up on my floor, I'm not happy. We're going to have a chat about that, okay? But, so you're going to see porn, and you're going to feel things, okay? So if it's my son, and, he's wired to, as a heterosexual male, he's wired, created by God even, to notice attractive women. Don't feel guilty, son. Don't feel bad. Like, you see a hot girl, let's say, and you're like, wow, that's really attractive. Like, that's okay. Like, that's how it is. I'm like that too. We're all like that. But what do you do with that? What's this story? How's this being portrayed? Okay? And, in the world of porn, this isn't real, okay? This is a construct, okay? Created by a company to make money from you, okay? This is no more real than like this happy, smiling people in the beer commercial or the car commercial or the whatever, okay? So you understand that, okay? Many things that you're gonna see in porn are very just straight up terrible. They're just terrible, okay? They're abusive. They're misogynistic, they're violent, they're cruel, okay? Not all of it. You'll see some porn where people are smiling and happy and look nice, and it's really exciting. And you're gonna get aroused and turned on and maybe wanna, look at that. And this is sort of like, thinking about snorting cocaine or doing some meth, because it can affect your brain like a drug. There's neurochemical changes that are gonna happen. You're actually gonna feel a euphoria and a rush from this, okay? So, we need to respect the dopamine in your brain, because it can make you do things that you might regret. And, I want you to talk about it. That's why, by the way, you don't have data on your phone, 12-year-old son. That's why, kid not yet in high school, you don't have social media apps on your phone. And that's why you don't have a password that locks out mom and dad, because mom and dad need to have a look at what's going on. Oh, and by the way, teenage daughter, you're going to get guys on Instagram messaging you and chatting you up, maybe sending you pictures of their penises. And you need to come and tell me when that happens. And I will never be angry at you.
And it's what you just said is we need to, and it's okay when parents say that if they blush. Like, right? It's not like, that is not a fun thing to say. But the problem, I hear lots of stories where the girl, I mean, yes, boys and girls both send. Too often though, it's a girl being asked, for pictures, and the boy just sends them, which is another conversation on many things. But I hear a lot of these stories where the girl sends something, and then the boy kind of ends up blackmailing her. Well, if you don't send me more, I'm going to tell your parents, or I heard recently your youth group or something else. And it's like, we need that relationship, so that even though how awkward those conversations are, that they know that they can come to us with anything, and we'll be there to support them.
Well, let me tell you a true story. It's one of the experts I interviewed, was a 13-year-old girl. Because I'm like, what better expert to talk to than a 13-year-old girl, right? So she's a friend of the family sort of thing, and really sweet, smart girl. And I was shocked that she even agreed. Like, I told her straight up what I'm doing. I'm doing this talk, and it's about this and that. And would you sit down and chat with me? And she's like, no problem. Like, I didn't even need to like hide her face or anything, you know? And so, you know, she gets a smartphone when she's 11, full data, full smartphone. Okay. And I mean, these things have like, these are more technologically powerful than the computers that landed the Apollo rocket on the moon, right? Like, they're unbelievably powerful devices. This is way too much power for an 11-year-old, by the way. For her mom, basically, all she said is, don't talk to strangers. That's it. That's her education. Don't talk to strangers. So within 2 months of getting her phone, she opened an Instagram account. And Instagram, by the way, from what I talk to, and I don't know what you hear, it's the main vehicle of social interaction among teenagers. There's Facebook as well, but it really happens in Instagram, it seems, anyway.
I find Snapchat a lot too.
Yeah, Snapchat and TikTok too, or other things. But anyway, so she starts getting texts from a guy, and hundreds of messages. You're so beautiful. You're so sweet. I want to come and see you. And, you know, an older guy. And then the dick pics start coming. The porn clips start coming. And she's 11. Okay.
Wow.
And I said, well, you must have went and talked to your mom, right? And she went, no, I couldn't go talk to my mom because my mom told me not to talk to strangers. And I talked to strangers. And I'm like, oh, you know, and so, and I'm not implying the mom wouldn't have handled it well or any of that. It's just in her 11-year-old mind. That was it. It's very black and like 11-year-olds are very concrete. There's not a lot of abstract thinking, right? So she said not to talk to strangers. I talk to strangers. So if I tell her I talk to strangers, I'm going to be in trouble. And she'll probably take my phone away. And I like my phone because 90% of the time it's just innocent fun, right? So anyway, I could tell you more stories about like that. But I absolutely agree, Brett. Relationship, right? So
I wrote the question down. Is this our fault for not warning or preparing our kids for this? And the problem when you say a question like that, there'll be a parent who says, I did a good job and it still happens. And that does happen, where a parent does good conversations around this and the kid still goes down that path. But for the most part, for the story you just said, for a lot that I hear, do we miss something on this as parents? Are we missing the boat?
So there's a couple of things with your question. One is parents is too general. And well, I'll try to answer. Like, I know what you're saying, okay, but it's very general. And the other thing is, it's our fault. Isn't I don't believe it's the right way to phrase the question. I believe the right way to ask the question is, did we do our job? Okay.
Oh, I like that.
Because when we do our job, correctly places correctly places responsibility where it belongs. Okay. Because basically your job as a parent, I mean, I think this is one of the jobs, is to teach your kid to be a decent human being, learn right from wrong, have empathy and respect, and take responsibility for their actions. So if you do that, and they still decide to go on and use porn or do things online that are harmful to other people, then those are choices that they made as teenagers or adults, but probably as adults. And also, you know, I think it's important to differentiate the proper amount of influence and control that we can have, and where that ends, right? And like when I read your question, is this our fault? I just wrote down yes. Like my first reaction was like, yes, you know, we're doing a terrible job. Because like I said, like parents are almost like criminally naive about this, right? But now as I'm thinking about it, I'm like, well, it needs a more of a nuanced answer, I think. And it's like, okay, did I do my job? Okay, so what is your job? And it's to have those conversations and, you know, go watch Brett's videos because you do a great job of talking about that. So I don't want to take time out here to do that. Oh, and also I should say really quick, a book that you did mention for kids is Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. Just go buy that book if you're watching this, and just go buy that book and read it, and then go talk to your kid. Like that book is it's perfect. Like the scripts are just perfect, you know, for talking to children, and then you can build from there. And for older teenagers, like the stuff I was kind of saying, I just ad-libbed all that, but that's kind of the gist of it, right? But then parents, like, let's not beat yourselves up too much because, like, there's a lot of relentless, incessant social and cultural pressure to give your kid a black rectangle.
Yeah.
And then when they get it, there's only so much you can do, even with all the filters and safeguards and guidelines and good, healthy conversations and good relationships and all of that. So you want to put your head on the pillow at the end of the day when your kid's 18, 19, 20 and go, you know what? I talked about it. I brought it up. I let them know I was there. I talked about boundaries, and that's it. Like, that's my job.
I think what I see too often is, let's call it willful ignorance in the church world.
Oh.
Where I remember once a church was going to bring me in, and they said, well, we want you to come and speak on sex. And I'm like, oh, great. And they said, but you can't use the word sex. And I said, what? And they said, well, it's too controversial, but we want you to address it.
Oh, what did you do? Did you just say, sorry, I'm not coming, or what?
Well, I had a long conversation with the lead pastor and their head of their board. Part of me wants to just lean into these guys because they're creating issues. But what I think, the older I get, the more I realize is that people only know what they know. And pastors often are just trying to love on the people, but they don't realize sometimes some of the consequences. And so I tried to just lead them down a road of having a conversation on sex is not it's not like, and this is what I hear sometimes, people say like, well, if we talk about sex, people are going to go have sex. Or if we talk about porn, people are going to go watch porn. But There's no studies in the world that say that.
No, it's not true. Like, even anecdotally, it's not true. Because I've talked to other people about that too. And they're like, what did someone say? Rob and Zareen Cope, they made a movie about this. And they said, if you don't educate your kids on this, the porn industry will. So it's your choice. They're going to be educated.
I guess here's an easy question for you. Are our kids ruined forever if they see porn?
No, not ruined forever. Of course not. I think, though, that we have to... there is stuff that's so violent and it's so violent and abusive that it can literally traumatize children and teenagers just from watching it for like a minute, right? So that's a very sort of black and white statement. Are they ruined? So I would say that it's possible that a lot of damage could be done that could take years to undo. For example, it's sort of like asking, like, if you were sexually abused as a child, are you ruined for life? There's damage, but a lot of people go on to live great life, great, happy, successful, fulfilling lives, right? So I think it's on a continuum, Brett. Like the kid that got into it a bit, watched it, a couple times a week, and then he just got involved in sports, and then he just kind of lost interest, and then had a girlfriend, and then and his life was good, and yeah, he did watch it, or he goes back every 3 or 4 months and watches for 10 minutes as a sexual release or something. Like, I'm not really worried about those guys, but if you've developed, and this is the thing, like, kids are starting at 11 now, right? Watching this. Actually, I think it's down to 9 is the average age of first exposure. So if you come into my office in your early 20s and you've logged 5, 6, 7, 10,000 hours of this, there's a lot of work to do, because there's a lot of change to your brain and to the neural pathways, and that's going to take a year or two to rewire those. Never mind the attitudes that you've internalized about women and sex and people and relationships and getting your empathy back and all of that stuff. So it has been called a modern public health crisis. It is being called that by a lot of people, and similar to what we called tobacco and cigarette smoking back in the 60s and 70s. So, and I agree with that assessment. I think it's one of the, I want to be careful about saying the most urgent social problem of our day, because there's many urgent social problems, but I definitely think it is one of the most urgent social problems. And yet, and it's everywhere, and yet, Brett, it's nowhere, isn't it? It's nowhere, because no one talks about it.
No. I liked your answer. I had written that down. I think the last few books I'd read were more on purity culture in our church world, which is like, if you do this, you're forever damaged, as opposed to wherever we're at, let's look at moving forward. I mean, it's the same with mental health, with, counseling for, marriage issues, for sex conversations. We could spend all day on this. I want to get a couple things left and we're done. Any books that you would suggest? I'm going to tag above my top 10 books for this conversation on porn. Any from you?
Yeah, I read your list the other day. I watched one of your videos on, well, I think it was called that, actually, my 10 books. So forgive me if I repeat any. Oh. But How Porn Harms by John Faubert. I'm not sure if that was on your list.
It wasn't.
So John Faubert, F-O-U-B-E-R-T, is a researcher. And he spent years just researching on the negative impacts of pornography. It's kind of academic. It's dry stuff. But we need to go to the data and the science sometimes about this, right? Like, all the things I shared, like, they're not really opinion. They're based on science and anecdotal experience, right? I'm not making this stuff up. I mean, like I say, this is every day at my office. But How Porn Harms is great. Unwanted by Jay Stringer. Did you mention that one?
I've read that, but I didn't put that on my list.
Yeah, so that's good it's kind of like why guys really watch porn. For people struggling with a porn addiction, Sex Addiction 101 by Robert Weiss is a good one. And anything by Doug Weiss. He was my mentor that mentored me when I got into this. And he runs heart-to-heart counseling in the States. So it's Doug Weiss, W-E-I-S-S. Clean is one, and maybe you mentioned that. And there's another one, Lust-Free Living, I really recommend. And I want to throw one in. This isn't necessarily about porn, but it's for partners of those who engage in compulsive sexual behaviors, and that's called Your Sexually Addicted Spouse. Okay, and this is for partners of porn addicts. Okay. Other books on porn, there was Wired for Intimacy, I think you mentioned, is a really good one talking about the neurochemical basis of porn addiction. And I think you mentioned Gary Wilson, Your Brain on Porn, and that website is probably the single biggest resource for the scientific data that talks about the impact of pornography.
I'm going to take all those books and I'll tag them in the description below so people can find those.
Yeah. And Matt Fradd wrote one, Porn Myths, I believe. He's a Catholic guy, Matt Fradd.
Yep. I follow all his stuff. He's quite good.
Porn Myths or Myths of Porn or something. And, two more. Big Porn Incorporated. So I interviewed the author or contributor Melinda Tankard-Reist. She's an activist and speaker in Australia, and a really amazing lady. Big Porn Incorporated will change the way you see porn forever. And also, Gail Dines wrote one called Pornland.
Yeah,
okay?
I have that too.
But not for the faint of heart, okay? Because she just lays it right out there. All right?
Yeah.
So I would end with that as far as books go. And there's more. Like, it's nice because, Brett, like 15 years ago, there was almost nothing. And now we're seeing a real resurgence of quality academic material, scientific and research-based material written by therapists and mental health workers, and even people that have come through their own addiction and written their books about their recovery. So there's a real wealth of information out there. Maybe I'll write a book one day too.
Hopefully. Listen, tell us, is there anything else you want to add? And then tell people how they can find you. And I will add that information into the description below as well.
Sure, yeah. So my website, turningpointforme.com, the number 4. Email me, turningpointforme@gmail.com. 705-868-8896. Give me a call. If you're a couple watching this and you've been impacted by secret sexual behaviors, let me know and I'll send you a free ebook. It's on Kindle for free, and it's called The Damage Control Protocol. So if you go to Kindle or Amazon and type in The Damage Control Protocol, you can download the book for free as well. And hopefully that's helpful. But yeah, so that's how you get a hold of me.
Awesome. Paul, I know you and I are going to do a few other future ones. One is if it's you struggling with porn, and one is if it's your spouse, looking at how we help kind of with that. I'm just really thankful there's more of us who all speak on this conversation. And so I'm glad we met a few years ago. Thank you so much for your time. For those of you who are listening, if you have any questions or comments, add them below. I'll make sure Paul knows where to find that. And if he wants to answer a few of those, he can. Hopefully, if you like this channel, subscribe to it, and we'll give you a lot more content coming up. I'll talk to you all soon.